Dad texted, "We're hosting 20 relatives at your lake estate. Stock the bar and stay out of sight." I replied, "No." He laughed. "Try to stop me." "Boy." "Friday," he screamed as cops arrived. The first time my father threatened to throw me out of my own lake house. I was sitting at my desk reading his text. "We're hosting 20 relatives at your lake estate. Stock the bar and stay out of sight." I stared at it for almost a minute. Then I replied with one word, "No." He called immediately. "You think you can tell me no? It's my property, Dad." He laughed. "Try to stop me, boy." That was Thursday. By Friday afternoon, he was screaming while 2 police officers stood on my front porch. To understand why, you have to know that my father had spent most of my life confusing ownership with authority. I'm 34. My younger brother, Daniel, is 31 and somehow remained the family's golden child despite changing jobs every year and accumulating debts he never discussed. I left home at 21, worked in commercial real estate, and eventually bought a modest lake property 3 hours from my parents. I never advertised it to my family. That was deliberate. For years, Dad called it the family lake house. I corrected him every time. He ignored me every time. The first real warning came 6 months earlier when Mom casually mentioned that Daniel was planning something big at my place. "What exactly?" "A wedding weekend," she said. She wasn't. Daniel had apparently told relatives that I had offered him the property for his engagement party. I called him. "You never asked me." "Your family," he said. "I knew you wouldn't make it difficult." "I just did." He hung up. After that, I changed the gate code, installed 2 cameras, and told my attorney to review the property documents. That's when I found something I hadn't known. Years earlier, when I was buying the property, Dad had insisted on helping with the closing paperwork. I had refused his money, but he still ended up listed as an emergency contact with a property manager. That wasn't ownership, but it explained why he felt entitled, so I removed him. Then I waited. Thursday's text confirmed what I suspected. He wasn't asking permission. He had already sent invitations. Friday morning, the property manager called. "Your father says he has authorization to access the house." "He doesn't." I figured. "That's why I called you." I told her not to let anyone through. There was a second problem. Daniel had signed a catering contract claiming he was the authorized resident of the property. That crossed a line. At 4:17 Friday afternoon, Dad arrived with 3 SUVs. 20 relatives followed. They carried coolers, chairs, speakers, and food. Dad called me from the gate. "Open it." "No. You're embarrassing yourself. You're trespassing." He lowered his voice. "Do you know how humiliating this is going to be when everyone finds out you're trying to ruin your brother's wedding? It isn't his wedding." Silence. Then he said, "What? That's the first thing you got wrong." 10 minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up. The officers asked for identification and proof of ownership. Dad produced an old document. He looked confident. Then my attorney handed the officers the current deed, property management authorization, and written notice I had sent that morning. Dad's face changed. One officer asked, "Sir, did you enter the property after being told not to?" Dad looked at me. "You wouldn't." "I already did." That was when he noticed the camera above the garage. The footage showed him opening the side gate earlier that morning and walking inside. He had been on the property for 11 minutes. It was no longer just a family argument. Dad shouted that I had set him up. I told him quietly, "No, you ignored every warning I gave you." Then came the final revelation. The wedding weekend wasn't Daniel's wedding. It was a surprise sale event. Daniel had been secretly showing the property to potential buyers because he was drowning in debt. Dad had agreed to help him sell it, believing they could pressure me into signing afterward. My attorney had discovered the messages that morning through the catering dispute. Dad stared at Daniel. Daniel stared at the ground. The relatives left in silence. Dad received a trespass warning and the catering company canceled. That night, I sat alone on the dock. My phone buzzed. "Dad, we're still family." I deleted the message. Family had been his excuse for taking things that were never his. The lake was quiet. For the first time, so was my father.